Welcome to Lifepoint. We are so glad that you are here today. And why don't you go ahead and stand up, look around, give somebody some air high fives or something, tell them how good looking they are. Let's get ready to worship our God together. If you're online with us, thank you so much for being here. You hold the seasons there in your hand. Breathe out creation, see it all, see it all. Skies that are crimson, storms in the night, scatter of lightning, do it all, do it all. Oh, the mystery, I can't explain your heart. Oh, the beauty of everything you are. Yeah. God beyond the wildest dream, glorious, the great unseen, the mountains bow before you, earth and heaven praise you. You're the one, God only one, who could ever know your mind? I will bow before you, lift up my voice and praise you, singing majesty. History's author, numberless years, nothing is hidden. See it all, see it all. Fathomless wonder, miracle great, love without rival. You do it all, do it all. Oh, the mystery, I can't explain your heart. Oh, the beauty of everything you are. Come on, sing. God beyond the wildest dream, glorious, the great unseen, the mountains bow before you, earth and heaven praise you. Yeah, 'cause you're the one, God only wise. So who could ever know your mind? So I will bow before you, lift up my voice and praise you, sing majesty. God, we've come to worship you this morning. God, just be glorified in everything that we sing, God. Let it be from our heart, not just be from our lips. We worship. Oh, the mystery, I can't explain your heart. Know the beauty of everything you are. God beyond the wildest dream, glorious, the great unseen, the mountains bow before you, earth and heaven praise you. Yeah, 'cause you're the one, God only wise, who could ever know your mind? So I will bow before you, lift up my voice and praise you, oh, singing majesty. Yeah, yeah. Singing majesty. Clap and shout his praise a little bit this morning. Welcome to Lifepoint. We are so glad that you are here, however you are here, whether it's online, at our family room, or whether you're right here. Hopefully today, this next hour can be a respite, a shelter from whatever storm of life that you might be going through, or the storms that we're all going through right now. Let's just sing from whatever we've got to sing with. How can I say it is well when my voice can barely speak? And how can I sing you a song in the midst of suffering? Jesus, will you meet me here? Let your peace wash over me, 'cause I need you now more than ever. Teach my soul to sing. Help me, church. My God is still in control, and still He reigns on His throne. Though mountains may tremble, sea billows roll, I'll sing it is well with my soul, 'cause my God is still in control. Yes, yes. Oh, you have not left me alone, though the world has let me down. All of my sorrow and pain, I will trade it for a crown. Thank you for staying with me when the night was closing in. Whatever my life, you are still God. I will sing again. Come on. That my God is still in control, and still He reigns on His throne. Though mountains may tremble and sea billows roll, I'll sing it is well with my soul. My God is still in control. We believe that this morning, God. Though we may not be able to feel it, we believe it. We trust it. We trust you. Would you lift this up with me? Say, church. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Come on. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Lift your hands, lift your voices, say, it is well with my soul. Yes, it is. It is well with my soul. Oh, it is well. It is well with my soul. My God is still in control, and still He reigns on His throne. The mountains may tremble, sea billows roll, I'll sing it is well with my soul. 'Cause my God is still in control. My God is still in control. Yes, you are, God. Still in control. Oh, still reigning over all, God. Wherever you are this morning, would you just close your eyes just for a moment? If you take a deep breath in and out, I don't know how many times you pause to take a deep breath, but in these days and times, it's a wise idea. Whatever storm is flooding currently in your life, can you just maybe out of a hard place, maybe at a place that maybe doesn't even really want to say it, could you just be willing to say, thank you, God, for being in control? Thank you, God, that I know your love is bigger than this world's hate. Thank you, God, that I know your peace is bigger than this world's storm. Thank you, God. Thank you, God, that your harbor is bigger than any sea. And then as hard as it may be, would you just join me in singing these words? It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. You say it, church. Say it. Come on, lift it up. Say it, church. It is well with my soul. Whatever happens, God, it's well. It is well with my soul. Yes, it is. It is well with my soul. Yeah. It is well with my soul. One more time, say, it is well with my soul, with my soul. Yeah. It is well with my soul, with my God, whatever is not well will be made well. Whatever is not good will be made good. Whatever is not love will be made love. Whatever is not perfect will be made perfect. That is the hope that we have in you, God. And that is the hope that we put our trust in. Be worshiped, God.
I was lost, but he brought me over his love for me. Over his love for me. Who the sun sets free, oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. Free at last, he has ransomed his grace and mercy. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a
We tend to label things in this world and in this country, whether it's a political label or whatever kind of label you can throw it at. But this is what God has said. God says none of those labels matter. You're my child. That is who you are. I have adopted you. I've made you my own. And you are nothing but my son, and you are nothing but my daughter. That is who you are. And that is what defines you. And that is what defines me. Let's just believe that this morning. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. Come on, believe it. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say. Come on. I am chosen, not forsaken. Come on, church.
Good morning. It's so good to see all you guys here this morning. It's great to have you guys watching online with us this morning. It's cool to see people start filtering back as we are kind of getting back in a rhythm, and we're still being safe, but just school's back and we're all kind of finding that rhythm again. It's great to see you guys this morning and talk to you. Man, I've just missed a bunch of you guys, so it's awesome to see you guys. There's a lot of cool stuff happening. I know you guys, some are watching, some here, some in the big room. We're doing some stuff with the CAC tomorrow, the Child Advocacy Center. We've sent people to Louisiana doing mission work down there with the food needs after the hurricane came through. And so I just love that we're finding places to serve, even as we're trying to figure out what this transition, this time looks like, and we're getting back to normal. We're finding ways to serve, and you guys partnering with us makes all that possible. When you give, you're supporting that. But look, if you're a guest, we don't expect you to give anything today. In fact, we're just so excited you're here. Can we give our guests a round of applause for hanging out with us? We're so glad you found your way here. In fact, if you would come see our lead pastor, Matt Brooks, who's going to be teaching after this gathering, he's going to give you a gift. He has a gift for you for just spending time with us this morning. One bit of just kind of serious news. We lost someone that was really precious to our church family this weekend. Melissa Cochran went to be with Jesus, and some of you may have served with her on the prayer ministry. She was leading that. She was sending out those texts. And so we're going to miss her deeply. We know she's with Christ, and we know that she would be continually just wanting us to keep praying for the needs in this community, keep praying that God would use this church, keep praying that we would keep doing the things that God's called us to do. But tomorrow night, there's going to be a gathering here to remember and celebrate the life that she lived and the impact she made. If you'd like some more details on that, just look on our Facebook page or see one of our staff afterward, and we'll give you the details on that, all right? All right, if you're watching and you're looking how to let us know you're a first-time guest, look above the Facebook page. There's all kind of links there that you can, on the video that you can click on those and leave your information on a connection card. We'd love to know who you are. And if you have a prayer request in here, leave on the connection card in your seat. We want to be praying for you, all right? Hey, stand up, turn around, tell some people hey, and we'll get rolling here in just a second.
Who the sun sets free, oh, it's free indeed.
right, guys, so it's our annual pastor retreat. And then we talk about where we're going. So we all got some ideas. I really think Taco World Championship's a great place to go this year.
How does that have anything to do with being a pastor?
Well, clearly we should go to a pastor's conference like Catalyst.
You know, I haven't really been thinking. I think one of the best places for me to sharpen my pastoral ministry skills would be the Antique Roadshow. I think that's...
Tom, you probably want to like get something or see if you've got something that's worth any kind of money.
It's the only TV show he's ever watched because it's on Alabama Public Television.
Look, we're talking about how we need to be younger and reach more younger groups. We need to go to something like a worship conference or something like that, something where we can like be around some younger people. And
That's all old people who dress like younger people.
Worship? Seriously? We worship at church. We've got enough of that.
Why does everybody like his idea better than mine?
Seriously. I mean, tacos have so much goodness in this world.
Yeah, shoes it is.
No. I'm just bothered about my tacos. I want some. The leadership, we're already in leadership. Why we gotta learn more about it?
His shirt too big too. I don't like that neither.
He needs to eat more tacos. That's what it is. He does.
His hair mess up. No hairline.
Yeah, we need to definitely get more angry about this so they know our point.
Can I play?
No, don't stop it.
Can I?
Stop.
Can
Stop.
Can
No.
Please.
Stop.
No. Can I?
Don't.
I'm just gonna take it.
No! I want that. It's not good enough. We need different kind of coffee. Stop the conversation. We need new coffee. Can't get into it without coffee.
Stop! We're not even having this conversation anymore. He made this stinking coffee. It tastes like dirty water. I'm making some coffee if we're going to figure this out.
Oh, me. And every time Todd makes coffee, it tastes like dirty water. No, I'm kidding. Man, it's good to be here this morning. If you're joining us online, thank you so much for hanging out with us. I do want to give a special invitation. I know some of you are watching online because of the pandemic and you're just not ready for crowds yet, and I understand that. I do want you to know that there's plenty of room between this room, our family room over in the big room in the new facility, and even at the coffee house at our 9 o'clock gatherings. There's still plenty of room to social distance. And I just want to remind you, as good a job as our multimedia team has done in providing an online experience, there's still nothing like being here. I was just sharing with someone the other day, I don't think I've ever realized more readily how much we do need one another. We need community. We were built for community. We're kind of made to rub elbows and hug necks. And so, we want to invite you back. We're doing everything we can to keep things as safe as we possibly can. And in a couple of weeks, we will be reintegrating our children's ministry back into the Sunday morning experience. And so be watching for that. I know there's a lot of people out there who it's tough to bring kids right now on Sunday morning. I mean, we do have the family environment, but it's tough, and I get that. And so, but be looking for that in the next couple of weeks. We'll be adding that back. And I just want to mention, Quentin mentioned about Melissa passing, going home to be with the Lord. I was aware of something. I turned on Facebook yesterday, and most of you watching online, if you've watched much from me, much around Lifepoint, you know this to be the case, that I'm on Facebook for one very important reason, and that's to creep on you. I'm just trying to be honest. It's a source of entertainment for me. Like, I love to turn on Facebook and be like, they've got to know I read this. It's just fun to do that and see the crazy stuff you put. And sometimes I'm looking at Facebook and I'm like, man, that's disappointing. But then there's times I look at it and I'm like, you know what? I've never been prouder to be your pastor. Yesterday I jumped on Facebook and I saw where some of our church family and some of Melissa's life group had provided like the world's biggest pizza to the family. I mean, it's from Old Nepali. Apparently, I'll just say this. I've only eaten there once. I got spaghetti and meatballs. It was good. Never ordered a pizza, but apparently you should be careful if you order a large pizza. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if they ordered like largest pizza or maybe that's just the large pizza. I don't know. It was huge, huge. And but the cool thing is apparently that was Melissa's favorite place to eat. So that was very meaningful to the family. And but I learned something when I saw that. Between that and I was over there very early, right after news had broke on Friday, and I got there and there were people there that served on a team with some members of the family, and there were some people there that was in Melissa's life group. And let me tell you what I learned that day. I learned if this is Lifepoint for you, what we're doing right now, this Sunday morning, this hour, if you're online, if this is Lifepoint, you watching online, if you're over in the family room, and this is the extent of your experience. Like thank you for being here. We love you. We're so glad you're here. You are doing yourself a disservice because this is really not Lifepoint. This is the foyer of Lifepoint. You need to get in the living room and you need to get in the kitchen and do life with some people on a more intimate level, because what I saw in that is when the rubber meets the road and the stuff hits the fan and life happens, this right here doesn't provide you, this can provide you information. This doesn't provide you the support system that you need when stuff goes crazy. I went to their house and expected to, perform the functions that a pastor does and do ministry and love. And I didn't have to do any of that because ministry was being done and that family was being loved on by their life group and by the people that they serve on a team with. And I'm just telling you that you want that. And so get in a group, get in a team, get on a team, get in a group. Both you can find how to do that on our website or the app. If you'll just download the app, there's a place on there where you can join a team and you can get involved in a life group. And I'm telling you, you want to do that. It is in your best interest to do that. I have a question I want to begin the morning with. We're in week number next to the last of a series that we started a couple of months ago called Inside My Head. And this series is all about understanding our emotions and really developing some emotional honesty, which, I can't think of anybody better to talk about emotional honesty than me, right? Every man in the room is like, this has been the greatest sermon series ever, right? Nobody wants to talk about their emotions, it doesn't seem like. However, understanding our emotions has the potential to really improve the quality of our lives and the experience of our lives. And so over the last few weeks, we've looked at things like anger and sorrow and loneliness, fear, jealousy. And next week, Todd's going to finish up this sermon series with us by talking about happiness, because when we think of happiness, we all think of Todd, and we can think of no better person than to wrap up this series than Todd. And I promise you don't want to miss next week. Todd's been working on this sermon for like 4.5 years, so it's going to be fantastic. And it'll be great. But as we kind of approach the end of this, I've been tasked to talk about something that I'm not even really as certain as we've gotten to this point in the message series. I'm not even sure it's an emotion. We kind of been wanting to talk about emotional honesty and how our emotions affect our lives and kind of their role. And the more I study this week, I think I've come to the conclusion that what we're going to talk about this week is not even an emotion. In fact, I think it is quite possibly the catalyst for other emotions. But if you remember when you were growing up, you had these books. Where you could read the page, and at the end of the page, you made a decision on which page to go to, and it kind of changed. You were the author of the story. Well, this morning, you're kind of the author of the sermon. Because I have a question, and based on the answers of the people, I can't see everybody at home, so I'm just going to have to take just have to assume you're playing along with us. But for everybody in the auditorium this morning, you got to participate, because this determines where the sermon's going. All right, and this is the question. I want you to raise your hand if you have ever experienced this. Have you ever had an expectation? You expected one thing to happen, but the reality was something very different. Anybody ever had that experience? Look at that. Almost all of us, right? Almost all of us, there's been some point in our life, and there's somebody in the room that's going, that's a dumb question. The better question would be, have you ever had an expectation that you didn't get a different experience, right? Because that's kind of how life is. Like, life is filled with unmet expectations. I've been married. I was told I messed this up a couple of times this morning already, but I've been married a little over 21 years. And when I had only been married a couple of years, so this is like 18, 19 years ago, my dad and I was working on Sand Mountain. This is way before I moved up here. We were actually taking the equipment out of the Aviagen plant that's over on Arbor Acres Road, if you know where that's at. We were taking the equipment out, and Jennifer and I and Jalen, this is pre-Jaron days, we were living in a place called Cragford, Alabama. All right, this is in the heart of Clay County. I remember looking up Cragford, Alabama on the worldwide interwebs at that point in time, and the population when we lived there was 0, which will cause you an identity complex. I mean, it's like, look at that. I thought there were people who lived here. Apparently, we don't, or we're not people, whichever way that is. Really, really small area. It's about 35 minutes from the nearest Walmart. And it's about 15 minutes from the nearest grocery store. All right, there were 2 restaurants that I remember in that county. One of them was called the Court Square Cafe, and one of them was called Eatigans. I preferred Eatigans because it's like once you eat there, you'll eat again, you know that kind of thing. But they both, the grocery store, the Piggly Wiggly, it was like 15 minutes away, and both restaurants rolled up the sidewalks when it got dark. Okay, and my dad and I were working up here, about 2.5 hours away. And this was pre-cell phone days. So when we get ready to go home, I would always go into the office. I would call Jennifer on the landline, and I would tell her, we're headed home. This is when you can expect us to be home, because that's what, considerate, nice husbands do. And so I called Jennifer this particular time and said, hey, me and my dad, we're heading home. We'll be there in about 3 hours probably, because we're going to stop and grab something to eat. And she said, no, don't stop and get anything to eat. I've got dinner plans. I'm going to cook dinner tonight. I said, really? Now, I said, we're pretty hungry. She said, oh, it'll be worth waiting for. Just, don't stop and get anything to eat. We're having stir fry. I said, okay, we'll have stir fry. So I hang up, go find my dad. I said, hey, we're not stopping to eat. We are stopping to eat. I said, no, we're not stopping to eat. We're going to eat at home. Well, I mean, that's 2 hours away. I know how far away it is, Dad. We're going to eat when we get home. He said, okay. So we drive home, drive back to my house, 2.5 hours, really hungry. And for those in the room who maybe you're not a culinary artist, let me give you some insight. Let's say you have somebody over and you're concerned about whether your hamburgers taste great. Here's a little tip for you. Just make people wait like an extra hour. Like play Monopoly, watch a little TV. Because the hungrier people get, the better food tastes. It's a true story. You get them real hungry, your average hamburgers are the best they've ever had. All right? That's all you got to do. We're experiencing that. The whole way home, me and my dad, our stomachs are eating themselves the whole way home. All right? I mean, we're so hungry. We pull up to the driveway, and you could almost smell the stir fry as we got out of the car. We go inside, and it's this beautiful spread of stir fry out on the dining room table. Asia Garden would be proud. It was awesome. So we wash our hands, we sit down to eat, and we say the blessing. It's the world's fastest blessing. Bless the food, amen, because there's no reason to catch up on your quiet time at the dinner table, especially when you're that hungry. And me and my dad both take our forks, and we dig in. Now, what I failed to tell you is that this is the first time Jennifer had ever cooked stir fry. And she was going by a recipe. That recipe indicated that she should use soy sauce. What it did not indicate is how much soy sauce she should use. So therefore, she assumed she should use the whole bottle of soy sauce. Me and my dad both take a bite. Before I can say it, my dad, now many of you have met my dad maybe. My dad's awesome. He's awesome. He unlike me, he just says whatever comes through his head. He doesn't have that filter, that brain-to-mouth filter that, I've been blessed with. So I don't say anything. My dad says, Jennifer, honey, I could eat a salt block. Ain't nobody could eat this mess. It's the saltiest thing I've ever put in my mouth. I'm just telling you. We could have had an 11-hour trip, and wasn't no way that food was ever going to be good. To this day. I mean, this has been 18 years to this day. My dad will come to town. And I'll say, hey, Jennifer said she cooked supper tonight. We ain't having stir fry, are we? To this day. Because there was an expectation that was way undermet. All right, way undermet. It was like, we thought we were going to get to eat stir fry that night. We ate salt blocks and ultimately like cornflakes because Eat Again's was closed by the time we got there. All right? Now, here's the interesting thing. When you're talking about an unmet expectation of how good dinner's going to be, it's just really, honestly, at the end of the day, not the biggest deal in the world, right? I mean, for us and my family, I mean, it's just a joke that never gets old. It's every time my dad comes to town, we're going to tell that joke. Only one person thinks that joke has ever gotten old. And it's just not that big a deal when you're talking about a meal. But sometimes in life, we're not talking about the expectation of stir fry. I mean, there's people probably sitting in here, definitely watching online, that your unmet expectation is that of a spouse. It's you got married and you expected this fairy tale, and instead you got this horror story. And you're like, you know what? Every day of my life, I'm living in this reality that things are not what I expected them to be. Or maybe you feel like you've fallen short of the expectation of being a parent. Maybe you feel like your kids haven't lived up to your expectation of them as a parent. I mean, I remember when I became a parent with Joe, I remember thinking, one of the things I always said was, I'm not going to be one of those parents that count. You ever been around one of them parents that count? You like see them in the grocery store, and they're like, get over here now. I said, get over here now. And then they do this, 1, 2. I'm like, well, they're already past now. And I was like, I will never be that parent. Next thing I know, I'm like 31, 32. Don't make me tell you again. Maybe you feel like you failed as a parent, or that your kids have not met your expectations. Maybe it's a job. Maybe you took a job. Maybe you left a job that you loved to take a job that you were convinced was going to be better, and it hadn't met those expectations. Maybe you're one of those people, and we have lots of them right now in our country, that you went to college and you spent a whole bunch of money, or you borrowed a whole bunch of money, and you've got a debt this big because you had this expectation you were going to get out of college and have this certain job, and now you're looking around and you're like, I make less money than my friends who didn't even go to college, and you're just living with this frustration of this unmet expectation. And whatever it is, here's what I think most of us in the room are aware of. We're aware of the gap. You know what I mean by the gap? It's that gap between expectation and experience. We expected this and we experienced this, and there's a gap. And sometimes the gap is this big, and sometimes the gap is like this big. And the deal is it's what happens in the gap that we want to talk about this morning. Because the default setting of your life, right? If you just click default in your life, the default setting of your life is to fill the gap with frustration. In fact, it's been said before, the definition of frustration is unmet expectation. And so what I would say to you is this the reason I'm not sure that frustration is really an emotion? I think it's a catalyst, because here's what I think happens. I think when we have an expectation and our experience results in a gap in between the expectation and the experience, and we fill that gap with frustration, here's what I think it happens. I think that frustration becomes a catalyst for one of the other emotions depending on your bend. So if you're like me, and this is just me being honest with you, when I get frustrated, I tend to get angry. That's just kind of my bend, right? And so when there's this gap in my life and I allow it to be filled with frustration, and frustration begins to become the epitome of my life, the next thing I know, everything in the world just makes me angry. Right? Everything just makes me angry. I mean, I'm driving down 431 and I'm convinced that people deserve to be executed because they don't know how to use the crossovers, right? Which is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Like, number one, it's ridiculous that I should get that angry at people, but it's also ridiculous that y'all don't know how to use them. And I'm also, listen, here's the thing. I can be almost okay with you not knowing how to use it. Here's what I hate is when you do it wrong and you're glaring at me. By the way, if you choose to do that, I'm not going to move. I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to watch you get angrier and angrier and angrier because I can't get any angrier at that moment. But you know why that happens? It's probably not your lack of competence. It's because somewhere in my life there's this gap between expectation and experience, and I've allowed it to be filled full of frustration. And so my bend is it pushes me toward anger. For some of you in the room, it probably pushes you toward sorrow. For some people watching online, maybe you find yourself that when there's that gap and it gets filled, the frustration pushes you toward sadness and depression. And maybe for some of us, it even pushes us to loneliness. We begin to isolate. And we're like, you know what? And this is how you know. This is how you know if your gap is being filled with frustration and you're one of the ones that's been toward loneliness. This will become some of the words you use. Well, man, I just don't like people anyway. People just get on my nerves. I don't like people. Here's what that probably means. Let me unpack that for you. It probably means this. People are not meeting my expectations. I thought that someone would do this, but instead they came in here, and you know what? I just don't need them. I'll just isolate. I'll just isolate. For some of us in the room, maybe it leads us to a place of jealousy. And this is what we do. For some of you, I'm just telling you, somebody in the room, this is what you deal with, or maybe somebody watching online. Your expectation was that you were going to get that job that was going to allow you to buy that house and afford that car or get that thing or that boat or that whatever it was. And maybe you did it. And you thought that when you had that house, that car, that acquisition, that it was going to just fix it. And instead, the expectation of the experience was here, and it came in way under here. And you filled that gap with frustration, and that frustration said, well, I must have just missed what I really wanted. I just needed a little bit more, and I needed a little bit better. And it fueled the greed in your life. And you suddenly start looking around, and you're like, you know what? They've got it, and they seem happy. I deserve it, and I'll be happy. And the jealousy leads to greed, and the frustration just pours fuel on the emotion that's running amok. See, I'm not really sure frustration is emotion. I think it's a catalyst. It's one option to fill in the gap between experience and expectation that, if we're not careful, becomes a catalyst to pervert the other emotions in our life. Wouldn't it be great if maybe there was somebody out there who understood this expectation gap, if you will, that maybe we could learn how to appropriately deal with frustration? Well, there is actually, and it's one of my favorite people in the entire Bible. His name was Saul. All right, his name was Saul, and he was a Pharisee, which basically just meant he was the religious elite. And he was supposed to be one of the guys that had it all together. And he lived during the time that Jesus lived. And he watched as the church began to emerge and began to take off and began to grow and began to threaten the very life that he had invested his whole life in. And so one day he decides he's got to put an end to the church. And so he leaves to go to this place called Damascus, where he is going to go and either imprison, abuse, or kill, if necessary, the religious people, the church, these people who are known as part of the way. He's going to do it in order to protect the religious sanctity of Judaism. And he thinks he's doing this to honor God, right? On his way, he is blinded, and he has a face-to-face encounter with the living, resurrected Jesus Christ, and it changes everything. By the way, if you're here today and you need to experience life change, let me tell you what will do it. An experience with the living, resurrected Jesus. It'll change everything. It'll change everything. So Saul that day, his name is changed to Paul, or he changes his own name apparently to Paul, to better identify with the Gentiles that he's trying to reach. And that day, he gains a new perspective, he gains a new passion, and he gains a new purpose. And he becomes single-handedly responsible for pushing the church to the uttermost parts of the world during his lifetime. In fact, he plants many churches, and he pens 2/3 of the New Testament to become the foundation for the way that we understand what the Christian life looks like. And on that day, he gets commissioned to walk away from his old life and walk into a life of purpose with Jesus. And he obeys it. And he becomes, in my opinion, outside of Jesus, the most influential, instrumental person in the cause of Christianity up until today. Outside of Jesus, I think he has more influence and he's made more of an impact on the cause of Christ than anybody else. So you would think, follow with me, you would think that if anybody was going to experience God's favor and would be able to have life together, if anybody's life would meet their expectations, you would think it would be that guy. And yet, he's writing a letter one day, and this is what he says about his experience. He says, 5 times I received at the hand of the Jews the 40 lashes less one. Now, maybe you're wondering, why didn't he just say 39 lashes? Well, this was a common phrase, 40 lashes minus 1, because apparently, historically, the Jews felt like 40 lashes would be what it would take to kill you. So 40 lashes minus 1 means we're gonna go right up till die. We're gonna beat you almost to death, is what 40 lashes minus 1 mean. And Paul says, I got that 5 times. Now, I don't know about you, but I think it's safe to assume that when Paul is blinded, has a face-to-face encounter with Jesus, has his passions changed, his purpose changed, his principles changed, his philosophies changed, and he decides, I'm going to go with God, I doubt there was that moment he went, and I'll tell you what I'm looking forward to, the beating I'm going to get. No, I'm pretty sure the day that they went, hey, we're going to beat you 39 times, he went, yeah, that just wasn't really what I thought was going to be in the cards for today. I was kind of thinking I might go by the coffee shop, get a cup of coffee today. Cup of coffee, 39 lashes. Didn't really meet expectations. If that wasn't enough, he says, oh, it gets worse. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Sounds like a fun day. Once I was stoned. By the way, we just say this word stone like it's just something like normal and casual. It means you stand here, we're going to get in a circle, take big rocks and try to bash your brains in. That's really what they did. We're not talking about like getting rocks thrown at you like at the playground. We're talking about we take stones and try to bash your skull. In fact, most people who were sentenced to stoning, they were looking forward to the stone that would kill them, to put them out of that misery, because the death was better than the experience. Paul didn't even get to have that pleasure. It was just, I just got rocks thrown at me. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I was adrift at sea. He's like, I was just out there bobbing in the ocean. Didn't even know where I was at. On frequent journeys, in danger from rivers. I said I was in danger when I was on the river. I was in danger from robbers. I was in danger from my own people. I was in danger from the Gentiles. I was in danger in the city. I was in danger in the wilderness. I was in danger at sea. I was in danger from false brothers. He's like, everywhere I went, danger, 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 danger. This is a guy who's doing everything that God told him to do. I mean, by all accounts, what we find is he stayed obedient to what Jesus asked him to do. And yet, here's the expectation, and here's the experience. He goes on, this isn't all of it. He goes on, says, in toil and hardship, through many a sleepless nights, in hunger and thirst. You would think God would at least give him something to eat and something to drink. He's like, no, there's been a lot of nights I was hungry and thirsty, often without food, cold and exposed. He says, and if that's not bad enough, apart from all those other things, the physical aspect of it, there's the daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches. He said, what does that mean? Well, you got to understand that Paul's purpose in life is he goes out to take the gospel to the ends of the world and plant churches all over the known world. So as he's doing that, he's like, then I got all this anxiety going on from dealing with all these churches. All right? And he's like, you got to think about it. I mean, imagine what he's like, I'm being shipwrecked, rocks are thrown at me, they're beating me with the lashes, and in the middle of all that, I got to write that letter to that church at Corinth because they keep getting drunk on the communion wine. I got to take time to write that. That'll probably take 2 letters. I doubt I can get all that done in one. I got to go deal with the church at Ephesus. I do kind of like them. Somebody needs to tell them they're pretty cool. They're doing all right. Church at Philippi, hey, good job on loving on each other. I've also got to write that letter over to the Romans. Got to do that. Got to tell them I've been wanting to come. I'm doing everything I can come, but God won't let me come. And then I got all, and he's like, I'm just stressed out. Got a lot going on. Expectation, experience. There's a big gap in between there. And then he says this. And he says, so to keep me from becoming conceited. Don't you love that? It's like, what? To keep me from becoming conceited because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations. He's saying because God given me all these visions and let me see what he's doing. To keep me from being conceited, a thorn was given me in the flesh. Now, I don't know what this thorn is. Some people think it's his eyesight. Some people think it might be a sickness. I'm not sure what it is. But it's apparently pretty bad because he calls it a messenger of Satan. Like, I'm pretty sure it's not like food poisoning, like from the local restaurant. We don't really call that messenger of Satan. You might while it's happening, but you don't typically call that a messenger of Satan. To harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. Now, this is the important part. He said 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. Now, some of you know what I'm talking about. Some of you know what Paul's talking about. Some of you beg God, this is not what I want out of life. Take this away. Some of you have begged God because you want something out of life you're not getting. Over and over you're praying, God, is this too much to ask? And that's the way you feel, right? You don't want to say that to God because like you've been to church and you grew up in Sunday school and that don't feel like the right thing to say sometimes. But what you really want to say is, God, is this too much for me to ask? I've placed my faith in you. Like, I'm on your side, God. I'd really like to have this job. I'd really like to have this child. I'd really like to have this situation. I'd really like to have this opportunity. I'd really just like to be healthy. Is this really too much to ask? God, does the gap have to be so big between what I'm expecting and what I'm experiencing? And for most of us, we just start filling that up with frustration. And we get aggravated. And that leads us to being angry or sad, broken, isolated. But what's the right thing to do in the gap? I want to show you what Paul did. I think this is so insightful to see how he dealt with the gap. He said, 3 times I prayed, and God didn't answer, or God didn't take it away from me, but here's what he said to me. Paul says, here's what God said to me. He said, Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. Now, don't read ahead. I want to help you with this. I love this idea because I want to remind you what the word sufficient means. It means enough. See, Paul said, God, there's this gap. This is what I want, and this is what I'm getting. This is my expectation. This is my experience. God, I really don't like the disparity between the two. And God goes, hey, listen, Paul, that gap, my grace will fit in there perfectly. It's enough to fill the gap. My grace is enough for you. See, here's something I think that is hard for us to understand. You can't know Jesus is all you need until Jesus is all you got. You can say it, but you'll never know that Jesus is all you need until Jesus is all you have. And he goes, look, I know you expected this. This is what you want, and I know this is where you're at. But all this in here, you don't have to fill it up with frustration. My grace will fit in there perfectly. And he says this, he says, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Now, let me give you a little Matt translation on that, all right? You see, because we grew up in America, because we've grown up in America, and we've been told we're the greatest country on earth, which I believe we are, by the way. I'm still convinced, greatest country on earth. If there's no other way to prove it, I'd say this. You know you're living in the greatest country on earth when all the people who hate it refuse to leave. That's a good sign. It's a pretty good place to live. Like, man, I hate this place. Why don't you go somewhere else? Because I'm not. It's a pretty good place to live. But part of being the greatest country on earth means we've been told our whole life that we're great. And sometimes we get convinced that this whole thing is about us. God goes, hey, listen. God's purpose in life is not you. He's your purpose, not the other way around. The chief end of God is God. God exists to bring ultimate glory to himself. You say that's arrogant. Yep, unless you're the greatest there is. And if you're the greatest there is, the thing you ought to do is glorify whatever is the greatest. So it's not arrogant. It's arrogant for me and you. It wouldn't be arrogant for God. And he says, hey, listen, you need to understand, my power is made perfect in your weakness. Paul, if you didn't have a thorn, people would think you could do it yourself. Paul, I want to do something so great in you that when people see it, they don't go, look what Paul did. They go, look what God did. And he wants to do the same thing in your life and in my life. You see, we have an option. I don't believe that the gap is going anywhere. See, I think there's some of us in the room that oftentimes we have too high of expectations. Okay, if we're just being fair. All right, I mean, I struggle with this. I mean, I just always feel like everybody ought to be perfect like me. And so do you. And so to a degree, you know what would help with the frustration you feel in your gap? Sometimes you ought to just lower your expectations a little bit and just realize that, you know, we can show people some grace every now and then, or all the time. But I'm telling you, you cannot eliminate the gap because life is about the gap. We will always be a gap between expectation and experience. And so what matters this morning is how are you going to fill the gap? The default setting of your life is to fill it with frustration. And allow that frustration to be the catalyst for whatever emotion you typically bend toward, whether it's loneliness, sadness, fear, or anger. A better option is to look at what Paul did. Paul said, listen, God, there's a gap. I don't want to experience this. Take this away from me. Fix it. And God goes, no, I'm not going to fix it. You need to know that my grace is sufficient in the gap. Because my power is made perfect in your weakness. So Paul says, so therefore, I make a conscious choice. Look what he says. I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. He says, in that case, I'm just going to be proud of the gap. And just be like, you know what, then God, then show your grace to be sufficient. Show your grace to be enough. Show me that when you're all I have, you're all I'll need. You know, bottom line this morning, I would say it's this way. Fill the gap with faith instead of frustration. And what does that look like exactly? What does that look like exactly? My guess is that you don't have any trouble recognizing the gap in your life. You know it. We're all keenly aware when we don't get what we want, right? We're aware of the gap. When you see the gap happening, This is what it means to fill it with faith instead of frustration. It means at that moment you have to consciously acknowledge, Lord, I'm not getting what I want. God, I don't know why, but this is not what I expected, and it's not what I want. This is not the news I wanted from the doctor. This is not the news I wanted in that relationship. This is not what I wanted to experience in my job. This is not what I want. This is not how I wanted today to go. But instead of allowing the gap to be filled with frustration, God, I want to just say, I trust you. I think you have a plan. I know you have a plan. I don't know what the plan is. I don't understand the plan. The plan may not even make sense to me, but I know you have a plan. And your plans are for my good. You're a good father who gives good gifts to his children. So therefore, I'm going to trust you in the gap. When I don't understand why there's a gap between what I want and what I get, I'm going to trust that you have a plan. And that you love me more than I love me, and you want what's best for me. So I'll be patient and watch as the plan unfolds. By the way, God's pretty good at filling the gap. You see, there's another gap of expectation that you may have forgotten about. That's the gap between your behavior and God's expectation of your behavior, and the fact that you fall short all the time. You see, the entrance requirements to a relationship with God was perfection, and there was a big gap between your behavior and perfection. And so, you know what God did? He took the initiative of the gap, and he went to the cross, and he paid the price for the gap, so that by faith in Jesus, you could experience relationship with the Father. He's really good at filling the gap. And he says, hey, I know you'll never meet expectations. So by faith in Jesus, his work on the cross, and his resurrection, I'll bridge the gap. In the same way, let's fill the gap with faith instead of frustration. Father, thank you for our time together. Thank you that you do indeed fill the gap. And Father, I pray that when life seems to kick us in the teeth and knock us down, and when our expectations aren't met with our experience, God, teach us to be patient and to recognize that you have a plan, and we can fill that gap with faith instead of frustration. In Jesus' name, amen.
We're going to sing a song of faith, a song of hope. Would you stand with us as we sing this together? Behold the Father's heart, mystery he lavishes on us. As deep cries out to deep, for how desperately he wants us. The things of earth stand next to you like a candle to the sun. Unfailing Father, who compares to his great love. Behold his holy Son, the Lion and the Lamb given to us. The Word became a man, and my soul should know its Savior. Forsaken for the sake of all mankind, salvation is in his blood. Jesus Messiah, the righteous died for love. sings my soul. Then sings my soul. Then sings my soul. How great your love is. How great your love is. Then sings my
Behold, I have a friend, the Spirit-breathing Holy Fire within, my ever-present help, speaking truth when I can't find. Light up this broken heart and light my way till my time on earth is done. Oh, Holy Spirit, breathe in me like kingdom come.
Say this prayer with us, church. Sing it. Oh, Holy Spirit, that your work in me be done. Then sings my soul. Then sings my soul. How great your love is. Yeah. How great your love is, Jesus. Then sings my soul. Then sings my soul. How great your love is. How great your love is. Come on, one more time. Then sings my soul. Then sings my soul. How great your love is. How great your love is. Then sings my soul. Yeah. Thank you for your love, God, that fills in all the gaps, all the empty spaces of our life. We're so glad that you are here this morning. Hey, can we do something? We've got probably folks watching for the first time online, may have people in this room for the first time. Can we give them a big round of applause this morning? Say thank you. Q mentioned it earlier, but make sure you take that connection card on your way out. Give that to Matt. He's in the first-time guest area, and he wants to give you a gift just for showing up. So, man, we would absolutely love to meet you. We want to love you and serve you, and we can't really do that until we know who you are. So if you're online, make sure you click on that link for first-time guests and do that. I want to encourage you to give as well. In the middle of a pandemic, we still got to keep the lights on. So we just want to encourage you to give whatever God's laid on your heart, and there's lots of ways to do that. We're going to have ushers in the back with buckets if you like to give in person. If you like to actually physically do that, and I understand that completely. But you can go to our app, you can go to our website, you can set up recurring gifts. There's also a kiosk in our foyer as another way to give. I know those come in really, really handy for me and my wife. I don't think my wife said something like, "Where's the checkbook?" And that was like 5 days ago. We still haven't found it. So we don't do that anymore. So that's coming really, really handy for us. Hey, we are so glad that you were here. Always good to see you. We love you. There's nothing you can do about it. We'll see you soon.